As the country marks the start of Nowrouz, the Persian New Year, we can talk to Burcu Daragahi, independent journalist and also author of the newsletter Badlands. Thank you very much for speaking to us here on Around the World today. Firstly, just how much contact can Iranians have right now with the outside world? And similarly, how much can we outside of Iran know about exactly what's happening inside?
Well, I think that it is possible to get some information out. The Iranian regime is distributing what they call these white SIM cards. That is SIM cards that bypass the restrictions on the internet to regime loyalists, also people who are willing to pay a significant amount of money. Now, these SIM cards are also heavily monitored, so you have to be careful what you say and what you distribute through those. We are getting some footage. We are getting some scenes of normal life from credible people, from even some Instagram accounts that I follow are showing scenes of life. And it does seem like people are getting ready for this very important holiday, the most important on the Iranian calendar. They're, shopping, they're getting food ready. They're in Tehran. Many people have left to go to the countryside, fearful of attacks like the one you're showing now, that have hit apartment blocks. The U.S. and the Israelis, they boast about the precision strikes, and the strikes are precise. But oftentimes what happens is you'll have a regime figure living in an apartment building with 10 or 20 units, and the Israelis will hit that whole apartment building, essentially killing or hurting everyone inside. And so that is having a devastating effect and creating a lot of fear and depression. And so a lot of people are not being in the festive spirit as they normally would be.
I'd like to talk a little more about this now weeks-long near total media and internet blackout. What are the practical but also the psychological impacts of such a sweeping move by the Iranian regime?
Well, I mean, practically, it means that it's hard to get information from the normal sources that we get information from. Psychologically, I think it makes people feel isolated. It makes people who are living inside the country unable to get in touch with each other even. Usually how people get in touch with each other in Iran is through apps like WhatsApp or Telegram or Instagram messaging. And because those apps are not widely available, it's hard for people to communicate with each other. I think people can use landlines, but as is the case around the world, people have stopped using landline so much in Iran. And also there's a fear that those calls are listened in on and recorded, and so there's a lot of fear there.
And what about then resentment? How do people feel about the fact this internet blackout seems to be never-ending?
I think there is a lot of resentment. I think people are angry, but they're kind of used to it. They just had this experience in January with the total blackout during the protests. That went on for a couple of weeks. But I think it makes people more depressed than anything. They don't feel like there's anything they can do about it. The sentiment that I hear a lot from the voices that do get outside is like, basically, they curse the regime for getting the people in the situation they're in. They curse the Americans and the Israelis for taking these airstrikes that force them to be sympathetic a little bit to the regime. And they feel like they're in this kind of, like they're trapped. And they're kind of locked into this situation that they can't get out of, and that it seems to be beyond politics.
Now, you say that people in Iran feel trapped between these two sides, the regime on one side and Israel and the US on the other. We have heard various attempts by US President Donald Trump, also the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, to frame this as a chance for the Iranian people to take control of their own country. How do Iranians feel about that liberation narrative?
Well, I think there's a lot of different opinions on that. There are many people who would agree with the Trump Netanyahu narrative, that they feel that this is a chance for them to do something. Those people tend to not be, in general, people who have access to weaponry or organization that would be necessary for the kind of uprising that Netanyahu and Trump fantasize about. On the other hand, there's a good portion of the country, and I've met with these people. I've talked with them. They're very hardcore pro-regime. They tend to be concentrated in the poorer sections of the cities and in the countryside, but they are hardcore, and they do have access to weapons and organization. And those are the people who right now do have the tools of communication. So it's quite a lopsided battle. And then there's a lot of people in the middle who are just trying to survive. And I think that that's what, in general, if you can imagine if something like this was happening in a Western capital, I don't think you would be organizing or getting ready to revolt. If you were under a situation like this, I think you would be organizing a go bag and a plan to protect your property and your family rather than stage a revolution.
Now, we know that already by January, when we saw those mass protests across Iran that were crushed by the regime, we saw that people were experiencing very difficult times, economically speaking. Do we have any idea about how this conflict is impacting the spending power of normal Iranians?
I think it's tough. It's a very hard situation. They were already in a very hard situation before this came about. Iranians were struggling before financially. There was a massive currency devaluation that hurt everyone's savings. Everyone who hadn't gotten their money into gold or dollars before this devaluation was hurt extremely hard. And in addition to that, people who are on salaries are basically, their money is worthless because, and every time there's a devaluation, there's a bit of a salary increase, but it's never enough to make up for the loss. And so, yeah, there's a real struggle, and people are just getting by, and sometimes they're not getting by. And it's always been like this. It's been like this for years and years now, since the maximum pressure campaign, since the exacerbation of the Iranian regime's mismanagement of the economy. There's been struggles among people and a struggle to live and survive.
Persian Daragahi, independent journalist, also author of the newsletter Badlands. Thank you very much for sharing your insights with us here at France 24 today.